Deep in the Alaskan wilderness, in the early 1980s, women began disappearing without a trace. For years, police had no answers, until one terrified teenager escaped a nightmare and exposed one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history. Tonight, we're uncovering the chilling story of Robert Hansen, the hunter who turned humans into prey. In September of 1982, two off-duty police officers from Alaska were hunting in a remote wilderness roughly 20 miles outside of Anchorage. The location was so isolated, the only way in or out was by small plane or boat, making the destination almost exclusively for experienced outdoorsmen. As daylight started to fade, the officers began making their way back to camp through thick forest terrain. To save time, they crossed a sandbar near the Knik River. While walking across it, one of them noticed something sticking out of the ground, a boot partially buried in the sand. When they moved closer, they realized there was a human leg bone still inside it. Understanding they could be standing in a crime scene, the officers avoided touching anything. They marked the location, returned safely to camp, and reported the discovery. Investigators arrived the following day and carefully uncovered human remains dressed in women's clothing. During their search of the surrounding area, they also recovered a single .223 caliber shell casing, commonly used in hunting rifles. The autopsy revealed the victim was a woman who had likely been dead for more than 6 months. She had suffered 3 gunshot wounds, making it homicide. Detectives also noticed something strange. None of the clothing had bullet holes in it. Investigators theorized she had been killed while unclothed and dressed afterwards. A bandage found among the clothing suggested she may have been blindfolded before being shot. A few weeks later, dental records identified the victim as 23-year-old Sherry Moreau, an Anchorage exotic dancer who had vanished nearly a year earlier. Her friends told investigators that recently Sherry had planned on meeting a man posing as a professional photographer, who promised to pay her for modeling pictures. Detectives strongly suspected this mystery photographer was responsible for her death, but they lacked evidence, witnesses, or even a name. The only clue was the shell casing, and in Alaska, countless hunters owned rifles that used the same ammunition. When news of the discovery reached the media, reporters immediately questioned whether Sherry's death could be connected to 2 earlier murders in the same region. 2 years before, authorities had found bodies of 2 women nearby. One of the victims was too badly decomposed to be identified, but the other was confirmed to be 24-year-old Joanne Messina, another exotic dancer from Anchorage. Officially, police said they saw no confirmed connection, but behind closed doors, many investigators disagreed. Over the previous few years, Anchorage had seen a disturbing rise in missing women's cases, particularly involving exotic dancers and prostitutes. To several detectives, it looked increasingly likely that a serial killer was operating in the area, but there still wasn't enough evidence to prove it. That was until June of 1983. Early one morning, a truck driver was traveling along the quiet highway outside of Anchorage when he spotted a young woman sprinting towards the road in panic. She was barefoot, missing her pants, and waving frantically for help. As she approached the truck driver, he noticed a handcuff hanging from one of her wrists. The driver immediately stopped. The terrified girl threw herself into the passenger seat and crouched down below the windows, clearly trying to hide from someone. Without hesitation, the man drove away from the area and brought her to a nearby motel at her request. Employees at the motel quickly called the police after seeing the frightened teenager. Police officers soon arrived and met a 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. Once they removed the handcuff, Sydney began describing an ordeal so disturbing that investigators initially struggled to believe it. The previous night, Cindy had been working as a prostitute in Anchorage when a man approached her in a car and offered to pay her for intercourse. He appeared non-threatening, small-framed, quiet, and ordinary-looking, so she got into the vehicle. Seconds later, he snapped a handcuff around her wrist and pointed a gun at her. He drove her to his home in a quiet neighborhood and brought her to the basement. There, Cindy noticed a chain hanging from the ceiling. He chained her to it and assaulted her for hours on end. Later, the man told her that he planned to fly her to a remote cabin in the wilderness as he casually showed her his house, his trophies, and the details about his personal life. Cindy realized something terrifying. He clearly did not expect her to survive. Eventually, he drove her to a nearby airport, loaded her into a small plane while gathering rifles and outdoor gear. The moment he turned his back, Cindy leapt from the aircraft and ran. She sprinted through the hangar and into the woods while the man chased after her, yelling threats that he would kill her if he caught her. Somehow, she escaped and reached the highway, where the truck driver found her. Although the story sounded unbelievable, Cindy's fear and level of detail convinced the investigators to follow up. She guided police back to the airport and identified the hangar where the plane had been parked. The aircraft was still there. A security guard at the airport told detectives that he saw the owner behaving suspiciously the previous night and had written down the vehicle's license plate number just in case. Using that information, the police identified the owner as Robert Hansen, a well-known local baker who operated a successful business in Anchorage. Investigators visited Hansen's home that same day. His appearance did match Cindy's description, so did his car. Inside the house, officers saw mounted hunting trophies exactly as Cindy described. Hansen appeared calm and cooperative, inviting police inside willingly. When questioned, Hansen claimed that he had spent the previous evening with friends. Detectives checked this story, and both his friends backed his alibi. Without physical evidence tying him to the crime, police began doubting Cindy's claims. After she refused to take a lie detector test, investigators lost even more confidence in her account. Feeling abandoned and frightened, Cindy eventually left Anchorage, and the investigation stalled once again. 3 months later, another breakthrough reignited the case. Construction workers uncovered human remains in a remote area near where the other victims had been found. The remains belonged to a 17-year-old Paula Golding, another exotic dancer who had recently disappeared from Anchorage. Near the gravesite, detectives found yet another .223 shell casing. Ballistics testing confirmed the casing matched the one recovered near Sherry Moreau's remains. Both bullets had come from the same rifle. Authorities finally knew for certain they were hunting a serial killer. Suspecting Robert Hansen, but still lacking enough evidence, investigators turned to the FBI profiler, John Douglas. After reviewing the case details, Douglas described a suspect who was socially functional, respected within the community, skilled outdoors, likely a hunter, and possibly affected by a speech issue, like a stutter. This description aligned almost perfectly with Robert Hansen. Armed with the profile from the FBI, detectives secured a warrant to search Hansen's home more thoroughly. This time, they uncovered crippling evidence: a .223 caliber rifle, jewelry belonging to Sherry Moreau, and a detailed map covered in 37 marked locations. Several of those markers matched places where bodies had already been discovered. Then, Hansen's alibi completely collapsed. One of the wives connected to the supposed alibi witnesses contacted authorities and admitted her husband lied to protect Hansen. Feeling cornered with the evidence mounting, Hansen finally confessed. He admitted to targeting vulnerable women throughout Anchorage, particularly dancers and prostitutes. Pretending to be a photographer, he would lure victims with promises of money and modeling opportunities, Once they entered his car, he handcuffed them at gunpoint. He then brought them to his basement, chained them up, and assaulted them, and eventually flew them to his remote cabin in the wilderness. There, Hansen forced the women into the woods and told them to run. But the hope of the escape was just an illusion. Hansen hunted them for sport. Armed with knives and rifles, he stalked the women through the forest like prey, sometimes for hours or even days. In some cases, he wounded them intentionally first so he could track their blood through the wilderness. When they were exhausted, injured, or too terrified to continue, he executed them and buried their bodies in shallow graves. Authorities officially connected Hansen to 17 murders, though investigators believe the real number was likely much higher. Robert Hansen died in prison in 2014, and the full extent of his crimes may never be known. Many suspect that the 37 markers on his map represent additional victims, but those remains were never uncovered. Robert Hansen took the truth about his many victims to the grave, and to this day, investigators believe there are still more bodies hidden somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness. The details of the story became so renowned, they went on to inspire the 2013 film, The Frozen Ground. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you like the video and hit subscribe. And remember, some monsters don't hide in the shadows and the darkness. Sometimes they blend in perfectly.